Okay. So we'll start with why we should be doing this at all. For us, anyway, we see a lot of benefits, and they've been proven in different kind of circumstances. Some of the benefits that we think that we should mention are these. Working with, it might be strange to say the benefits without you knowing what maybe norm-critical approach is, but we're gonna let you know, I promise. But some of the benefits are that it creates more opportunities, both to the audience, musicians, and the organizations. And we believe that it's a way of actually bringing more people interested in your field. It increases the creativity within the field that you are working or within the organization that you are working. It creates a good working environment, for example, by preventing discrimination, bullying, and other violations that are. And this is actually proven in a study by the Swedish, a study that the Swedish government has been doing here. And it's a permanent evolving process. It's something that never stops. So if you like this kind of thing, you will like it for a long time. It doesn't end. You will never be finished with this kind of thing. There is always more to do. And it's a very positive and smart way of seeing things, and actually quite unnerving. In the beginning, when I was working with this kind of issues, I was quite nervous. What kind of words should I use? How should I behave on stage? How should I greet people? What is okay and what isn't? What's the correct or appropriate way of doing things so that it's done in a way that's inclusive for all and things like that. There's so many questions and so many small holes that you can fall into on the way. But for me, and I think Lotta agrees, with the help of this norm-critical approach, actually I can feel that my mistakes are making me smarter. Instead of being nervous of making a mistake, I can try to understand the mistake and learn from it, and thereby actually feeling, it's okay, I made a mistake, but I actually feel quite clever now when I realize the mistake and what I can learn from it. So for me, it's a very positive way of seeing things, and quite unnerving, actually.
Yes, I should just say something about the history of this begrepp. What's begrepp? Concept of this concept. When we, this is like the second time we do this in English. So it's like, how are we going to translate? There's not actually English word, because this is an invented word. If you did, I didn't do it because the word didn't exist, but if I would have done some kind of internet search, I don't know, Alta Vista or whatever you used back in 2003, I would have got 0 results because the word didn't exist. Back then, you talked a lot about gender pedagogy in Sweden. I don't know how is it in the Nordic countries, but the concept of our preconceptions about gender affects how we interact with girls and boys. For example, they made an interesting study on in a preschool in the northern parts of Sweden, where they put up cameras to film themselves, the pedagogues, and they realized a lot of stuff that they were doing that I were not aware of. For example, when boys hit each other, it was described as they were playing. And when the girls hit each other, it was like, don't do this. And so, or another thing they realized was that when the boys, the kids they ate food, the pedagogues placed them boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. And the girls were, the word that was invented was fender girls. I don't know the word fender in English, but it's like you put them on side of boats so that, it won't break like the boat. And so the girls were like fender girls who had to take the punches from the guys. Like you put girl, boy, and then the girl is a fender. So that was one thing that they saw, that the girls were very silent. And the other thing that they saw was that the boys didn't have any language for the stuff on the table. They said, and then the girls took the jam or whatever and gave it to the boys. And it's funny, but it's also extremely depressing. It's like, why? Okay, so the girls have to take all the punches, and the boys don't have any language. And then they, of course, recreated the circumstances. They loved their mistakes. Actually, in the beginning, when they saw the films, they said, "We did not do that." Well, it's on the film. No, no. Yes, it is on the film. So it's really like you have to just accept that there's so many things you don't know. It's not because you want to do bad. It's just you haven't reflected on stuff. And that's one of the bases in this norm critical perspective. But anyway, we talked a lot about gender in 2000. So maybe if you Alta Vista gender pedagogy, you had some results. But not norm critical approach. But in about 2007, me and some other pedagogues, and mainly academics, like people in universities, had a study circle. We were interested in gender pedagogy, but we were also interested in how norms about sexuality affected how we interact. Like when a boy and girl plays in the sandbox, you say, "Oh, they're in love." No, they're playing. They're not in love. Like you always preconcept that boy and girl, it's always, and how does that affect that what we were interested in? But then we realized there's a lot of other preconceptions which are connected to class, to ethnicity, to age, to geography, rural or like cities, and there's so many stuff that affects us. And then we started talking about, instead of gender pedagogy, and norm pedagogy, and then we invented the word norm critical pedagogy. And then in this circle there was a person who was at the Swedish school department, Skolverket, like the authority that works with school issues. And she was working on this report on how to improve the work of anti-discrimination in schools. And she wrote this word in one of her reports. And a word in a report means something. And then the word was out. And then in 2009, me and another colleague got a prize for this work. And then was writing about, and the people started writing about it. And then finally, it was just out there. And now when I Googled it just a few days ago, I had 117,000 hits on Google. So it's quite a short story, it's short history, but I think we've got some, like, this was a needed word, a needed perspective, because it's got such a big effect. So we're just, what the word is right now, it's like something that we are defining and redefining together. And we're going to present what we think it is and how it can help you in your work. Yeah.
This is actually you again, if you want to continue.
Is it? I have my note down there. I can just take it up. Okay, thank you. Good. It wasn't the norm to fall off the stage. Thank you for helping me. So, what is the main purpose of the norm critical approach? David has been talking a little bit about it, but I should say the main purpose is to reveal unconscious, like the pedagogues in this example, reveal unconscious rules or preconceptions and actions that control our choices, values, and that sometimes they can limit both ourselves but also others. And the main purpose is, when we understand this, we can create more space for ourselves and for others. Space to think, space to be, and space to create. And that's what makes this work so much fun, because it's nice to have space. And it focuses, as I said, not just on norms connected to gender, but also norms connected to ethnicity, function, age, religion, and other beliefs, sexual orientation, gender identity, and class. And the first 7 of these are the Swedish discrimination grounds, which is in our discrimination law. Class is not, but of course there's a lot of norms connected to class. And what norms is, we will get into that later. And in the beginning, when we invented this word, we had a lot of critique on the word critique. It's like, what do you want to like dissolve all norms? What kind of society will we have? It will be chaos. Everything will be, you know, we won't be able to have a society if we don't have norms. And we don't, norm critique doesn't say anything about dissolving all norms, but it's the concept of being constructive critique is to see and then think, do we want to have this? Does this fulfill our purposes or not? And what do we do with this kind of norms? So it aims to evolve rather than to dissolve. And I should also say that, so it doesn't mean that all norms has to be dissolved, but the ones that limits people. Like we have a lot of norms in this room right now, which makes it easier for me to stand here in front of you and talk. I like that kind of norm. I like that you're not like throwing papers at me, or that you're like talking to each other, or like you're giving me focus. It helps me. That kind of norm is a good norm. It creates a space. But the norm critique focus on the norms that limit space and how to open up, to make people more free to be who they are and to create and learn. And I should also say that, is it one more? No, thank you. Maybe I should do this myself. I don't know how many of you have heard the word intersectional. Yes, no? I just want to say that norm critique is based on the idea of intersectionality, which is like an academic word, which is really hard to explain in one way and what it is in another way. But you can say that, like, I define myself as a woman, but I'm not just a woman, I'm white. I stand on my 2 legs. I would define my background as middle class. My nationality as Swedish. All these things together creates the space for me. So they are all interconnected. So like we all live and act in different kinds of norms, and they all are, which are like giving different kinds of power. When I explain it to my students, I say that, like, imagine a black woman sitting in a wheelchair compared to a white guy sitting in a wheelchair. That's different. And if that woman also is a lesbian, then something happens with her power. So it's all these things together that norm critique has its foundations in, that it's all different kinds of norm that affects power and space. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now I'm done, right?
Yes. And we're here because we're sort of actually the experts on this field. As Lotta said, there's a lot of different ways of using this norm-critical approach, but whatever kind of use you are making, it's still based on the same kind of idea. And you here are experts in your field. So I can't be standing here on stage telling you that the only way of doing this is doing this and this and this. I think you all have fantastic ideas. You probably already work with a lot of things that is including more people in the jazz field. But we are here to present like the basic conception, and then we all together are here to find at least something that you feel can add on to whatever you already are doing. So we're here to help each other. There's a lot of different fields here, and I think that this is probably the field we're going to discuss here today, norm-critical jazz. But for example, here in Sweden, there's a lot of talk now about norm-critical law, or norm-critical leadership, or norm-critical pedagogy, where it all started, or norm-critical organization development. But to do all this, I think you already know what norms are, but we still have to mention just talk a little bit about the actual norm. What is this kind of word and how do we use it? And how is the norms actually affecting all of us? So when I looked at in my dictionary what a norm is, it said that it's an unwritten rule, something regarded as typical. It's a principle, an ideal, a pattern that controls our behavior. It's ideas and values, all that kind of stuff. And I think you already know this word. But how is it seen? How can we be part of what is the actual norm? If we are here today to think about what's the norm in, for example, the jazz field, or in my organization, or in my country, how do I get a concept of that? Because usually the norms are invisible, and they're only visible when someone breaks them, because then you are reminded that, there's a norm about that. Now I realize that that person is actually breaking the norm. And why is that person doing that? Is it because it's needed? Someone is breaking the norm to make a point and show everybody that it shouldn't be just this normative. We all shouldn't be doing everything exactly the same as we always have done. Or is it someone that actually doesn't know how to be social or how to behave themselves? On my way here, I went with the subway and I took the escalator. Thank you. I took the escalator up. And there were there was 2 persons that were standing on the wrong side on the escalator. I don't know if you know about the norms in Stockholm subway, but you have to stand on the right side because people are moving along the left side. So you can walk on the escalator. It's very annoying when someone stands in the way on the left side because it really gets jammed. I don't know if this person made it on purpose to there's a norm about everything has to be so stressful. Stress out, please. I'm standing here, you have to stand still and think a little bit. Or if they were just ignorant and not understanding the norms. Because there's no one, it doesn't say when you go in the subway in Stockholm, you have to follow this norm, stand on the left side. It's something that you just have to know somehow. And how do you know that? You've learned it somehow, you've seen how other people do it. So that's the problem with these norms. They are invisible and quite hard to know about, especially if you change cultural places or geographic places. But even if you move around in different circles here in Stockholm, you will see quite different norms in different streets, in different cafes, in different music venues, and so on. There are so many different norms that we all automatically behave against in different ways. And these invisible norms actually create power. Because their invisibility, it makes it harder for us to protest and say, you shouldn't be doing that. That's not okay to exclude people in that sort of way, which some norms actually are. Some norms are very excluding. But because they're not written down, it's not a law, it's not a political, something that people have voted about or anything like that. It's very hard to actually change norms. And that's where we all have to think, how should we think about this? How can we change the norms, and what norms should be changed, and what norms do we need to actually be able to interact with each other? Yeah, I think we've said all this. And as Lotta said before, there are good norms, which really are necessary. They prevent us from hurting each other and be able to easier interact socially. And there are bad norms. And according to me, a bad norm is something that limits people's opportunities or their freedom or space to interact or create. It's a norm that makes us live, behave, or create in a certain way, even though we might not want to. can you be with me on this good and bad norm division? Yep, thank you. So we move on. We're just going to make a short sort of exercise here. All of you have to let your arms down by your sides. All of you are able to do that? Yeah? Thank you. And now I want you to just cross your arms, please. Excellent, thank you. Put your arms by the side again. And this time you have to cross your arms, but in the other direction. Use the other hand that you didn't use the last time. Okay? I took a little bit longer, but all of you actually managed. Thank you. Let's try it one more time. We're going to cross our arms in the way we're not used to. Okay? Now. Wow. Most of you actually already learned this, and some people are still struggling. Thank you. It's just a quick way of showing us how used we are to do things in a certain way, and that it's possible to change them. But it can take time, and we have to be reminded of them. We have to try it out. We have to exercise this kind of way of thinking or doing the other way around. And it can be very useful for us to try to twist things now and then, just to make sure, am I doing this just because I'm used to it, or because it's the best way of doing it? Is this the norm in a jazz band nowadays, or is this a stereotypical old picture? I don't know. I've seen similar pictures on posters not long ago, but I've also seen a lot of other pictures that doesn't represent this kind of thing. But it all depends on who you ask and what kind of norm there are. When I had this music club, there was a girl in her 20s that came to me and asked if I could book her band. She said that she was a singer and that she really loved to play her instrument. And she was so positive, and I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. What kind of instrument do you play? I'm a singer. Aha, okay. Sorry, I didn't understand. Yeah, that's an instrument, of course. Oh, yeah, excellent that you love your instrument. It all depends on what you are used to, and I felt really mortified. I was booking bands, and I thought I was kind of aware of things. And then suddenly I just made this kind of assumption that singing, of course, isn't an instrument, but for her, of course, it is. It's her instrument. So it really depends on how we look at it and how we use things. And that's a very typical norm. At our musical school where we teach, it's exactly the same kind of situations that come up. There seems to be still sort of a gender gap between what sort of instruments people play or are practicing on because of their gender. That there are a lot of more, for example, drummers in our school that are men, and a lot of more guitarists that are men, and a lot of more singers that are women, and so on. But there are also always the people that don't fit in that description and actually break that kind of norm. And it's happening things all the time. You see a lot of more people in all the different music fields and all the different instruments. So we're heading towards, I think. But there's still a lot to do, and I think all of you are part of making this thing evolve even further. Albert Einstein said that it's a shame that we live in a time when it's easier to break an atom than a norm. Well, it was easy for him to break an atom, but anyway, it says something, I think. And the question is why it's so hard. Why do we still follow these norms if we don't like them? And what kind of norms do we like and not? Usually it's because of the corrections and the rewards surrounding them. When someone breaks the norm, in different ways this can be indicated or actually corrected. Someone who breaks the norm can be subjected to laughter or ridiculed or just made invisible. And invisible is actually the normal way of dealing with norm breakers, especially in cultural field when someone plays another instrument or has the wrong gender or the wrong ethnicity or sexuality or whatever, or a different kind of music approach or creativity. Usually those people are felt invisible because they don't make the scenes as much as maybe they should if you just thought about equality or different kinds of aspect of their creativity. But there is also the very real threat about people breaking norms. They can be subjected to violence or threats on the streets. There is still a lot of crime that actually is due to people breaking norms. Here in Sweden, not so long time ago, there were people attacked with and stabbed because they had been on a Women Liberation Day demonstration and were attacked by people who thought that was bad, or whatever you want to call them. So there is still these kind of hate crimes against people who break norms. But the most usual form of making people to follow the norms isn't actually the threats or the knives or the laughter. It's usually the positive encouragement giving or the positive affirmation given to people who follow the norm. I have, maybe it's a childish example, but I have an example. My friend's daughter went to preschool, kindergarten, and she was usually wearing this kind of clothes that are supposed to be able to be worn both by boys and girls. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or girl, you can have the same clothes, especially when you're a child, because the bodies are exactly the same size. So usually she went there with like a shirt and a pair of trousers. But this day I went there with her mother, and we were going to a party, and she had just gotten a dress. It was sunny afternoon. We went out on the kindergarten, and we had a hurry, so we had to change the clothes right there in front of everybody. So we took off her clothes, put on the dress, and suddenly all the people working there came to her and said, "Oh, you're so cute. Oh, that's so nice. I've never seen you in a skirt before. Oh, that's lovely." And she has never gotten so much attention from those people working there. So the next day she wanted to have the same clothes, and the day after that, and the day after that. They just wanted to be nice and show their appreciation. But it also made it very clear that the norm for her now was to be wearing skirts. It's that simple to, I mean, it's such a small mistake, but it's that simple to make it. And that's probably the normal way of making people fall into these kind of norms. Yes,
We're going to see a film now about this. It's a film from a project called The Macho Factory, which is it's made by three different organizations in Sweden that did a common project on norms surrounding masculinity, which I would say is one of the hardest norms we have. Like if you break the masculinity norm, you can be quite punished in different ways, talking about corrections. And those corrections can be in different ways. As David said, it can be like, "Are you fucking fag?" or whatever, "Are you?" Or it could be like, "Well, he's not a real man." My example, I think Dressman, the chain Dressman, it's all in the Nordic countries. Do you? Yeah. For me, Dressman is like the masculinity norm. It's like 15 men who are the same height, like they're all white, they're all about the same age. It's like 30 to 50, middle age. They all walk on their both legs. Like they look exactly the same. They're like robots, and they all walk in a line. "Dressman, directly to you." It's like, okay. And so this is like talking about intersectionality. It's not just that they're men, and it's the norm on how to be a man. I don't know who recognizes himself in this norm, but I think it's interesting that it's like 15 of them in the same line. And this project was about to make norms surrounding masculinity visible, and like the symbol of the norm in this project is a box, like a paper box. So when you stand inside the box, you're in the norm, and when you step out of it, you're somehow punished in different ways, so that you step back into the box again. And this is one of 15 films, so it's in different ways. And to these films, it's a working material, and this education material is a lot about like describing the box. How does the box look? What privilege does it give you to stand inside the box? And what happens if you step out of it? And what is the power of standing in the box? Because standing in the box gives a lot of power. And this has been a very successful project. Not actually in Sweden, it's been used actually a lot in South Africa as well, to make the norm very visible. Like when you use this with students, which this is aimed at like high school students, they say to each other like, come on, step out of the box. Why do you put me into the box? Come on, let me out of here. You know, it's like, it makes it very easy to understand. And this film is called My Sister's Favorite Music. So it's about music. And it's just a way of visualizing the idea of the norm and the box. And it's like 3 minutes long. So if we can get some dark here and focus on the film. No.
Vad fan gör du seriöst? Lägg ner. Ärligt talat, skärp dig då.
Sanna Nilsen. Vad fan är det för bögmusik du lyssnar på egentligen?
Ja, men jag har ju sagt det i min syrras, ärligt talat. Seriöst, så säger till henne varje dag att hon inte ska lägga in sin skitmusik på min dator. Men hon lyssnar fan inte. Här är något jag lyssnar på. Hide the Knife, så jävla bra, lyssna.
Hallå? Ja, jag ska börja med att kolla. Ja.
Sitting here alone with my memories, staring at a picture of you and me. They say I look fine, but if walls could talk, they tell you all about how much I break apart. I think we were right, but we did it wrong. Ever since you left me, I just can't go on. No, I can't even read the news today, 'cause everything reminds me of yesterday. Empty room, empty heart. Since you've been gone, I must move on. Empty room. I never realized it could make me cry to hear the children laugh and play outside. A walk in the park shouldn't be bad.
So this makes it very visible, right? So I would like now to just let you think a little about these things. To talk to the one sitting next to you, just first reflections. What do you think when you see this movie? But then you can think a little about what are the boxes where I work? Which are our boxes? And what are the rewards if you stand inside the box? The rewards and maybe the power to stand in the box. And what happens if you step out of them? What's the correction or the punishment? Please. Okay, it was a short discussion. We're going to discuss 2 days, so now we started. It's always a good sign when it's hard to get the audience to be silent. I think that's an indication of that there's a lot to talk about and to ponder about. So I'm just interested, curious. It's always like I give lectures, or we give lectures to so many different kinds of groups, and as David said in the beginning, you're the experts on your field. So I'm extremely interested. Can we have some examples? So you can say them and then I will repeat them so you all hear. Can we have... You have to break the norm now, talking about this room. Yes, what did you... I understand that, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I understand that. Yeah, you like stepping out is that's often a response. You get shit or corrections and yeah. Yeah. But it's yeah. So like the norm is like the norms in the, because I'm obviously a novice. What is I don't know anything about this, so I just repeat what you said. So it's like in a big jazz band, there's a lot of norms surrounding different kinds of instruments and positions in the jazz field and how you do stuff. And the audience that you see maybe live in kind of a little different kind of norm, so they don't like that they maybe don't see themselves in this kind of band, and you want to give when you say that maybe you need to move a little bit in this norm in the jazz band, you get a lot of shit. Yeah, okay. And I would say like always when we're pushing the norms, like okay, now I'm here in a dress, you know, but if I would have been here in pants, and that would have been 100 years ago, I would have gotten a lot of shit. I don't know if you know Yves Saint Laurent. Who, yeah, maybe you heard the example, like, because it was some film about him right now, I think, and there was this example that he made this costume, a woman's smoking, in, what can it be, 1920s, well, like in the beginning of the 19th century, 1900s, thank you. And he got a lot of shit for that, a lot of shit. But there was a lot of French women said, thank you. It's more practical with the trousers. So, like, but pushing the norm, like saying, what, do we need this box? Of course you get shit, because, like, if you stand in the box, it's quite, like, comfortable, and somebody says, maybe you need to move. It's like, no, I do not. And also because it's power to stand in the box. But, like, I think the aim of a norm-critical approach is not to dissolve the boxes, but to see, oh, there's boxes. Maybe I can step out of this box and get into this one, and try this one, and maybe discuss why should just this box be the one that is considered the most valuable. So it's like seeing the boxes, but that also, you know, makes it a bit scary, because the boxes is also security and power. But we don't want to dissolve the boxes, we want to question the boxes. But that's sometimes creates some shit. One more example, do we have any? So it's norms about how it should look in a room, what kind of furniture you need to be able to listen to jazz. It's interesting, but it's like David said at the beginning, it's like when you break the norm, it becomes, suddenly you see what it is. But then you can slowly create more space. I think you had so many more examples, and in the end of this day, we're gonna discuss all these kinds of different things. So just keep them for yourselves, and you'll be able to discuss them later this afternoon. Oh, it's me again. Makes me a bit nervous talking in English. My head is just spinning. So, one very typical way of dealing with the ones who are not in the boxes is to say that, well, it's tolerance. To tolerate the ones outside the box. So you're going to do an exercise right now. So just put maybe, did you talk 2 and 2? Some of you. So take that person again, and if you did not talk 2 and 2, try to find just one partner so that you're 2. It's also okay to be 3, but not more. So you need to be 2 and 2, maybe 3.
Okay, we will show you what to do. You don't have to worry.
So this is what you do. One of you says like this: David, I see that you have a blue skirt, sweater on you. Skirt. Woo! Then, ooh, I was close to the norm there, to the box, you know. Skirt, dangerous. Skirt, shirt. I see that you have a blue shirt. It's totally okay with me, really.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then David does this.
I see that you have black shoes on you.
Yeah.
That's okay with me.
Thank you. So you notice something on the other person, something that he or she is, well, that person is wearing, and then you say that it's totally okay. Fine with me. And the other person has to say thank you. You have to say thank you. Okay. You're welcome. Start. Okay, we'll stop there. I'll stop there. I see a lot of laughter. What is this exercise? And I see also a little bit like, what? So I see kind of different emotional and intellectual reactions. This way of using tolerance is a very common way to deal with the people who doesn't stand inside the box. It's like we say, like, well, you know, we all need to be tolerant towards those who are homosexuals. It's totally okay, you know. They're not in the box, but they're fine, you know. And or you say like, well, maybe not anymore, but I don't know. Say that that person isn't white, you know. It's fine. He is or she is totally okay, even though she or he is not white. Like you. And I think the awkward thing about tolerance is that you're actually exercising power over someone else. If I can make an example with you again, David, which always works, like if I says to David, like, I see that you have quite a big nose, David. It's quite okay with me, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. It always becomes a bit awkward in this room when I say this. Because this is connected to your ethnicity, and then ethnicity, yeah. And then it's like, oh, don't say that. It's like, oh, because then the power becomes visible. Or when people say to me, it's like, I see you're very tall. Yes, I know. I see you also have a gap between your teeth. Yes, I know. And then people say, well, you know, there's a lot. Marie Fredriksson, she has a gap. Yes, I know, thank you. And I'm so tired of saying thank you all the time. I'm so tired of being tolerated. And what I'm tired of is to be somebody is exercising power over me. But this is very, very common, a very, very common way to treat the ones outside the box. Or you can say it's like, you know, it's totally okay that you play drums, even though you're a girl. It's very nice. Or like, oh, you're a guy and you sing. It's like, you use this. It's sometimes described as the tyranny of niceness. And it's hard to like, you're nice to me, I don't like it. It's like, because it's hard, but it is a way of exercising power. Tolerance, like norm critique, is usually put as a contrast to tolerance. Instead of saying those outside the box are okay, you say, oh, what is the box? But the problem is with tolerance is that it's only the norm that has the privilege to tolerate. It's just one way. And it focuses on the others, dividing us into them, recreating the power system all the time. even though we don't want to be bad, but that's the consequence. And you all you automatically think that, okay, everybody in the audience or everybody, all the students, they are not the ones outside the box, because we are all supposed to learn that the other ones are okay. But you don't know who's in your audience. You don't know who's in your student group. You don't know that. So it's a way of exercising power. And it leads to cementing norms, not challenge and maybe change them. And it doesn't give an explanation. Who's a teacher, and we're teachers, we work a lot with bad words. Like, you shouldn't say that somebody is a hooker. You shouldn't say that somebody is a fucking fag. Stop. Because it's a hard thing for them to be that. But then you just create some kind of obedience, like, okay, I'm sorry, I won't be. But you don't understand why these words are even used. And norm critique is a way of just focusing on the system instead of the ones who are not fitting into it. And that's a quite different way of seeing it.
Thank you. So we've been talking about this, and Karin actually mentioned in the beginning here that we have a rule in this conference that is about mistakes. So we thought it's important to talk about mistakes, because mistakes are actually very important to us and a crucial part of the norm-critical approach. And we like to talk about the possibilities of mistakes, how wonderful mistakes actually are. They may not feel so wonderful when you're doing them, but they can be wonderful afterwards. So according to us, you must actually be interested in your mistakes to be able to use this approach. Guilt doesn't lead to development, and therefore we need to exist together and help each other in this field. For example, when I started new at my teaching job at this musical school, I had a class with some students that were quite hard to control for me somehow. They talked a lot, and it was very hard for me to have the lesson. So afterwards I went into the other teachers in the teaching lounge and said, oh, this class, it was so hard. I didn't know what to do with them. And all the teachers just looked at me, and one of them said, what? I've never had a problem with those students. Oh, thank you. Okay, I'll share the next mistake with you. Yeah, sure. I felt terrible, and I didn't know what to do. But nowadays, with the people that I work, we have talked about the possibilities of mistakes, and people actually share their mistakes and are happy when someone does that. For example, I noticed that I greet people in different ways. At this school, there are so many students that I meet in the hallways all the time, and I noticed that sometimes I say, hi, like this, hi. And sometimes I say, hello. I don't know why. I didn't realize why, but I felt that there's something wrong with this kind of thing. I say two different kinds of greetings, and maybe it's two different kinds of people. So I started thinking about it, and I noticed that most of the students who got a hi were boys, and most of the students who got the hello were women or girls. I was really ashamed. But nevertheless, I actually walked into the teaching lounge again and said this mistake, and this time people were cheering me on. They're like, wow, do you do that? You're supposed to be the expert. Wonder how I'm doing. How am I greeting people? What's the first thing I say to a student when I meet them? How do I greet the other teachers? And this lively discussion started. It's such a small thing, but it's still very important. And I think that this kind of things develop us. And we need to share the mistakes, and we need to think about how we react and how we behave and why. Is it something I've learned? Is it because it's the best way to greet people? You all should actually be greeting men and women differently. All of you have to say hi and hello. I mean, that's ridiculous. Obviously, there's something else that made me do this. And it's very interesting. And this kind of thing also makes me understand who I am. Okay, I may be the expert on this, but still I make so many mistakes. It's ridiculous. And why is that? Because I'm understanding that I have a background. I've been living with my parents, I've been living in Sweden, I've been raised in this kind of society, I've been watching films and TV and reading books and all of this, listen to different kind of music, and all of this has shaped me into who I am today. And some of those things I might not actually like anymore, but they're still there somehow, and I have to fight them or understand them or realize them to improve myself or improve the environment around me. Because actually my greeting people differently is actually making the hallways of my school a worse environment for the students. That's horrible. Just because I'm greeting people differently, that could make some people uncomfortable or maybe question how I look at them. So this norm-critical approach will never be done. We continue to learn by the mistakes we do and our new discoveries. And it's a very reflective way of seeing things. And that's also why I think it's so interesting to work with this or to think in this kind of way. I jumped a little quick here. So the best way to start is actually to look at ourselves. Who am I? What kind of position do I have? I might be the promoter, educator, band leader, boss, etc. What kind of power do I have in my organization or in my contact with other people or with the audience when I'm playing or with the bands I'm booking or whatever? And what do I do with that power? How do I use it? Do I make people more comfortable? Do I make the boxes bigger so people actually can move in them? Or am I part of the narrowing down of the boxes so you feel that people are squeezed in there and don't really know how to move or behave? There's been studies that show that a lot of people put so much time on how they should behave. For example, if you look at 15-year-old boys in Sweden, they put more than half the time of their time in school thinking about how they should behave. What are the norms? How should I behave to be accepted by others? Instead of actually learning things or being creative. So it's very important to make this kind of space for us, to be creative and to be able to work in the best possible ways. So we all have different kind of choices to make, but we have to be conscious about them. That's the most important things. And we have to remind each other. It's not only that I have to notice my mistakes. If you have a good working environment, you can help each other. And like, hello, I'm sorry, but did you notice what you just said, or how you did that, or what kind of poster you used, or what you wrote in that email? I think maybe we should think about not excluding people like that, or whatever. That you have an environment where you can actually bring these kind of questions and talk about them without feeling this guilt. Because it's very hard to tell others how to act because of this kind of idea of the guilt could be too much for them to bear. But if we talk about it before it can be made, we can have an environment where we can share our mistakes. And all of this can be very tough because most of the people, exactly as Lotta said, it's this kind of, but I'm a nice person, I didn't mean anything bad. And that's usually the truth. All of us want to do good. Well, normally anyway. But we still make mistakes that can affect people. And that's why it's very important to put this aside. It's not the prestige about how nice person you are, it's about knowledge and discussion and all these kind of things. So to conclude this thing of seeing yourself, this norm-critical approach, according to us, is a way of increasing the professionalism in your field. I think all fields need to look at what they are doing to be more professional and to gain a bigger audience or to use their power in a better way.
Yes. I'm going to finish by saying some things about how this can be put into practice. We talked about a lot of theory. Just thinking. You can see that this kind of work can be used both in your external work towards, for in your case, audience, in my case, students, but also internal works, like the organization, the working environment, in my case, our teaching groups and stuff. So this way working can be used in different directions, both inwards and outwards. But you can also see it as it can be used in two different fields. Norm critique can create space which is connected to treatment, how like identity, to be able to be the ones you want to be. But it can also create space in knowledge, not just to create space in the identity, but also in the thought or in the way of seeing how the world works or what does exist. And I just created some examples. Like this is a model, and like all models, it's lacking a lot of. You can't include everything, but this is a way of looking at it that we're gonna come back to. So I just was thinking, like, I wonder how it is to be working with jazz. So maybe to work with norm critique in the according to treatment in your external work is like, who feels welcome to our jazz club or festival, and who is recruited into our organization, and in what way, and how do you feel when you're recruited? Now, when you're talking about the internal work, one example could be like, well, equal treatment inside the organization, but also representations. Who are, and that's connected to recruitment, of course. Like, who are we in this organization? Who are represented? If we say something about like knowledge and representation, you can externally think about what kind of bookings do you do, what kind of how does your promotion look, what kind of signals do you send out, what norms control those things when it's represented there. And you can also think about like internally. I was like internal, like what is jazz? How do you see this field? What is this? If I'm going to share a mistake, I had an intern once, a teacher intern, who made her internship with me because I was a norm-critical drama teacher, and we had a teaching period about theater history, and I was talking about the theater history, singular form, the only one, and we had 8 lessons that were the same. And after the 7th lesson, she said to me, like on the lunch break, Lotta, how do you have you like made your selection of plays? Like it's only plays made by white, Western male person. It was 7 different plays. I was like, can it please open up a little hole in the ground so I can just disappear? I was so ashamed. And this, I've been working with this for a long time. I never ever thought about this. It was just like, it was only white, male, Western playwriters. Only. It was 7. I could have chosen something else. But because I didn't know anything else. And then I just realized I had to study more. It was embarrassing. So what's jazz is like, what is jazz? What could be a parallel? And what can jazz be? Could be a way to norm critique. And I also want to say something about like how do you do this? And I work right now in a project where we try to make practice out of the theory, and we've landed in a way of thinking about it that it's like you can do it in 2 different ways. You can work in projects like this to highlight these questions and to enable increased knowledge and a common understanding, and therefore make plans to create more space. But if you just do this, and you don't do anything in your everyday life, if you don't do any micro actions in your everyday life, this doesn't matter at all. It's just a project that we don't really mean. So the thing that really matters is the micro actions. Like, what pictures do you put in your promotion? What words do you use when you talk about musicians? Like, all these tiny, tiny things. Small changes that you can do in your everyday life, in your work. Small things that need some thinking, like a process in you, but that creates permanent and true space and change. Like, you slowly change stuff. And you need that base so that these things can, be believable at all.
Somehow. The main purpose is for us to try to cheer you on your development of your own work. As we've said many times here, you are the experts. You already work with this, you know what's needed, but we think that it's always necessary to get external input and once again look at yourself and your organizations and your work. What do you do? How do you create more or less space for people? We really want all of you to have a constant discussion about this, to try this thing out in different ways. And as Karin and Lisa said here in the beginning, the main focus is to at least find one thing during these 2 days that you feel that you can take home to whatever you do at home and try it out. Does this work for me? How can I work with this? And I think that we all here can find some common ground and maybe make some kind of plan on how we can help each other in this kind of work. And it takes patience. We have 2 days here today, but it's not going to happen in 2 days. This is, as we said, an evolving process. So be patient, but also notice all the small things that are happening. I've been working with this, as I said before, for 7 years. This school that me and Lotta have been working with, it took a few years, but after a few years, we actually saw results. And now everybody can see those kind of results in this school. It's really obvious that both the people working there and the students going there are aware of these questions and are making more space for each other. They're talking about this, they're questioning things, they actually kick these boxes around a little bit. They still exist, the boxes still exist, but it's happening. And please, love your mistakes. That's it for us. Thank you very much.